my phone's on the desk.
All right, thanks so much for being with us here on Atlanta News First Plus. I just want to let you know that we're following an update on the YSL case, the Young Slime Life trial. Of course, you know, we've been covering this extensively involving Atlanta rapper Young Thug and a number of other alleged associates. Well, the newest development now is that another defendant has now been severed from this very lengthy trial. You know, still a jury's not been selected, and this is you know, jury selection itself has just been going underway now for months. It's the fifth month now underway. Well, now defendant Blaylock, Damon Blaylock, was severed from the trial on Monday after falling ill ahead of court. That's what his attorney, Justin Hill, is saying. So what are the implications here? Well, joining us here live on Atlanta News First Plus, we actually have his attorney, Justin Hill, joining us. You know, obviously, it's a great honor to have you here, given all you, and you know, you've been inside that courtroom day in, day out, working on this very high-profile trial. What's the impact now of your client being severed?
So the impact, as you know, in cases with multiple co-defendants, cases they can all be either tried together as in one trial, or they can be tried separately. Now, in cases like this with so many co-defendants, of course, the more defendants that there are on trial, the longer the trial. So with one less co-defendant, or just generally with less co-defendants, that can potentially shorten the trial. But also in a case where it's a conspiracy, and it's in a case like RICO, where the crux of the case is that all of the defendants are working together in some sort. Severing co-defendants can potentially impact the state's theory, because you know, if when there are defendants that are separated from the trial at a later date, if and when the state elects to try them, then I guess the fundamental question can be, okay, where if this is a conspiracy, then how come they were not tried with everyone else, or where is everyone else?
So it's very interesting because, you know, there were more than 24 defendants initially on this case, as you know, that were charged as part of this trial, and now it's 9, right? So does this kind of harm the state's case, or what is the impact in that sense?
Again, like it could potentially, but I won't say that it necessarily harms the state's case. But that, you know, it really all depends on exactly what the state's theory is at this point. Of course, the state hasn't shared their theory with us. So, but again, like I said, when the state is presenting a case and they are alleging a conspiracy with, you know, particular defendants who are not present, that can potentially pose a question to jurors. Okay, if this is a conspiracy and these alleged members are, you know, allegedly a part of this conspiracy, where are they? Why aren't they here?
And you know, when you were speaking to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, you kind of described this sort of camaraderie that you developed with other defense counsel during the course of this case, because there were so many defendants, and I presume you had to work very closely together. Tell us about that a little bit.
So yeah, so in a case like this, yes, each of us represent our own particular client, and at the end of the day, that is our own responsibility. But when the case where it is an alleged conspiracy, there are often times where the counsel will need to work together and at least be on one accord when it comes to certain things, because, like I said, in a conspiracy where everyone is tied together, it is important to make sure that each counsel is on the same accord and making sure that no one is necessarily harming the next person, because like I say, in particular situations, I guess harming or doing something that may seemingly benefit your client over the next may not necessarily benefit the entire group as a whole.
Yeah. Now, do you think that this is going to make the trial go faster, though? I mean, sounds like there's been a lot of discussion about the length of the trial, and a lot of that being that it was so complicated with so many defendants. Is this going to make the trial a little bit more efficient?
It's very, I won't necessarily say efficient, but I can say it's possible that it could make it go faster because, as you know, when in the state has to prove each of the predicate acts, and for each that each co-defendant is alleged of committing, and when there's a co-defendant that is no longer a part of the trial, that is a particular aspect that the state does not necessarily have to prove at this moment. So that could potentially shorten the trial. I won't necessarily say make it more efficient, but it could potentially shorten the trial.
So your client did not want to be severed, it sounds like. Is that true? And if so, why?
So the reason that he was severed is because he fell ill. Now, I got a call on Monday morning from one of my colleagues informing me that my client was ill and that he was so ill to the point where he did not want to appear in court that morning. Now, as his representative, I can't necessarily force my client to do anything because it is his case and I'm merely his representative. So I speak with him regarding, like I said, the pros and cons of his decisions, and he informed me that he wanted to waive his presence. Now, what that means is, so a defendant or a client has a right to be present at all critical stages of the proceedings at trial, and jury selection is considered a critical stage of the proceedings. Now, at the same time, he also has a right to waive his presence, and if he does that, I can communicate that to the court. And generally speaking now, if I communicate to the court or the client communicates to the court that he wishes to waive his presence, then I am able to, be present and represent him in his absence. However, in this particular situation, I can't, I can't necessarily conclude as to why, but I know the judge does have wide discretion to sever. However, in previous instances where this has happened, the judge I know has not severed defendants, but again, like I said, the judge does have that discretion, so you can do nothing but respect his decisions. However, I communicated that to the honorable court, and the judge elected to sever my client. He wanted to, like I said, not appear in court. He wanted to get further medical attention, and the judge basically informed us that either he could be present today or he'd be severed. And I communicated that with my client. I spoke with him about the pros and cons of him being present, being absent, him being severed versus not being severed. And ultimately, at the end of the day, after consulting with my client, we moved forward as the way that, we felt best, and that is what happened.
Understandable. And so, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion, of course, including in the media, including right here on Atlanta News First, Atlanta News First Plus, about really the burden of taking on a case that would go on for so long. In some ways, is it a relief now that you're not involved with the case going forward?
So I would say that the case, a case of this extent and of this length, definitely can be a tax on, just the person, just the person generally, and then especially, as defense lawyers, a lot of us, have private practices, we run businesses, so it can also, after so long, be a tax on the business as well. So I would say on a personal level, it is kind of a relief being off of the case. However, just generally, like with all of my clients, if I take on a case, I'm giving 100%. I'm going to fight 100%. So the fact that I took on the case and that I was on it, I had made up my mind that I was going to give it 100% until the end. So to that extent, I guess at this point, starting and not necessarily being able to finish at this moment, I won't necessarily say that that is a relief or that is necessarily a positive in that particular respect. However, given the outcome that we have, I think that the outcome that we have is good, because at the end of the day, like I said, there were pros and cons to severances that I discussed with my client. One being, like I said, the state, at this point, especially depending on how the current trial turns out, the state may or may not elect to proceed with prosecuting at a later date. That's totally up to them. And with that being said, like I said, I discussed that with my client, and as long as my client is comfortable and happy, to me, that's a win at the end of the day. So
Sure. So now we're down to 9 defendants in this case. Why have so many? I mean, I know it's case by case, it's individual. We covered it when one of the attorneys, one of the fellow defense attorneys, Mr. Menendez, when he was arrested, and then his client ended up getting severed from the case, but other defendants were severed for other reasons. Is it kind of surprising that you went from more than 24 defendants and now to 9?
So I won't necessarily say surprising, because especially in a case of this extent, like this isn't normal for a trial to be this long. Like I'll say, for a usual trial, a long trial would be 2, maybe 3 weeks. So with a case of this extent, and it's been 6 months and we're barely through jury selection. So people are human. Things are bound to happen. People are bound to get sick. Something is bound to happen. So it's not really surprising that this many people have been severed. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if more people end up being severed before opening statements happen.
Well, so then, I mean, that's kind of, if there are even more defendants severed, I mean, there's only 9, so it doesn't really feel like a RICO trial in that case, does it?
I'm not a prosecutor. I've never written a RICO indictment, so I can't really speak on that too much. But I mean, at the end of the day, I guess we'll see how things go.
But generally, interesting. So, but I mean, that's kind of, I think a lot of defense attorneys have said this is one of the issues with a RICO trial, is it, or with this kind of increasingly more popular trend of trying to pursue these sorts of cases, where you have so many defendants, is that it gets messy, and you can't keep everyone on the same page on the same schedule.
Right, and especially in a case that of this extent that lasts this long, like I said, like, people are humans. Something is bound to happen. Like I know very early on in the trial, there was a COVID outbreak amongst a lot of the defendants, even amongst some of the lawyers. So like that's just human nature. Like a trial that's going to last over a year, people are bound to get sick. People are bound to have family emergencies. Like something is bound to happen to the point where sometimes I guess for the sake of efficiency, sometimes it may not be feasible to try everyone together in a case like this.
That makes sense. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us here live on Atlanta News First Plus. Attorney Justin Hill, who has been representing one of the defendants in the YSL case. We really appreciate your insight.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.